Today I'm super excited to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Scott Richardson. He is a teacher in Davis, and he is also a teacher leader in the Sacramento Area Science Project. And one of the reasons why I am personally super excited to have Scott here to talk to you is that Scott is probably one of the most influential people that I have had in my career as a teacher, and I credit a lot of who I am right now as an educator and as a science professional development provider to Scott and all the work that he's done and modeled for the teachers in our region. So because I've been asked to keep the intro short, I'm now going to hand it over to Scott, who will be leading our keynote this morning.
My name is Scott Richardson. I teach at Davis High School and have been doing that for going on, do I dare say, 30 years? I've been at it for a very long time. And one of my fondest memories of Elk Grove was actually when I was in junior high school. My cousins live in the Sacramento area. I came to join them on a bike ride starting in downtown, the old original downtown Elk Grove, when there wasn't much Elk Grove. And we took a bike journey for several days, and it was a wonderful experience. That's my fond memory of Elk Grove. My most recent is working with some of you in some wonderful team leadership, some leadership workshops, some great experience. So some of my favorite teachers are here in the room. Kelly is one of them. So if you get to work with Kelly, I think you're going to learn a ton. Let me give you a little bit of idea where we're going this morning. I'm going to try to avoid the puns. I'll try not to. Science teachers, don't we kind of fall into this too often? And certainly I don't have all the answers. Some of you, especially you teach middle school, yeah, there's no 49, there's no one easy step, is there? And I am going to address a little bit of how many of us have a Calvin. I don't know how many Calvins I've had, but I'm sure you have your share. And it makes teaching interesting, would you agree? Well, a lot of what I want to do, and you'll see as we go to through this morning, I don't want to just blab at you. I do want to get you to interact and think and talk. So we're going to be doing some thinking and figuring out together this morning. Let me give you a little sample of one thing we're going to do, and that's this. We're going to be looking at some maybe puzzlers, you might say, like this, and try to figure out what in the world is that? That's an example of a little bit of what we're going to be doing. But there are a couple of key questions I want to focus on, and they're actually fairly simple. Questions you can probably answer yourself, but I want to dig into them some. One is, what is science? You all have an answer to that. And the second, what do I want my students to become? Both of those I want to address. And again, they're simple questions, but they have a lot of depth we could take them to, and I want to try to get into some of that depth. And both of them I would like to address through the lens of NGSS. How does the next generation science standards overlay or filter how we answer these questions? But let me start with a little experience I had about 3 weeks ago. My family and I just recently came back, a few weeks back, visiting some family in Bend, Oregon. How many of you have been to Bend? Beautiful city, wonderful, especially if you love the outdoors. And we were just up there visiting family for a very short weekend, but we got to do some whitewater rafting a little bit. They've got a number of rivers. And it kind of hit me later on that some of the experience of rafting, there's a lot like teaching going on in there, in the sense that teaching can be, it feels like sometimes in a year that you're always running through white water, and you barely come up for air, and then you hit the next rapids. Is that your experience sometimes? You know that feeling. Well, what I also noticed, and this was kind of interesting, is the person sitting in the back of the raft, what we call the guide. Any of you ever been a guide? It's quite an interesting job. And, you know, I never knew it, except for the fact that in our raft, we connected up a GoPro on one of the extra paddles sticking out the back of the boat facing forward. And I never realized, as I was up there doing my job and paddling and enjoying the water and getting all wet, how much work that guide was doing. And like a teacher, that guide was doing way more behind the scenes than I ever realized to make my experience the best it could be. And isn't that what teaching is? You work your tail off, and the kids don't always see it. That's a lot of teaching, would you agree? But there's also something else about this. The people up front, I was one of them, he would command, tell us to go forward, to maybe back up, or to stop, whatever. He was barking these commands through the sound and the rush of the waves, and I felt like I was really doing my job. But in some sense, I was really a little bit more than a tourist. In some ways, he was doing all the work because he knew this river, and I was really just there to enjoy it. And then I thought, is that what teaching is? There's a guide who really does all the work, and the kids are playing tourist. And it made me really think about my own classroom. I want to give some thought to that a bit today. So, what is science? What do I want my students to become? So let me ask you to take that white card. Does everybody have a white card now? Without talking to your neighbor, I want you on your own to write an answer to that question. Give it a moment, think about it, and write something down. Would you now trade it with your neighbor? Notice similarities, differences. Now trade again with somebody else, somebody new. Keep trading. So did you see a lot of similar themes? Did you see some differences? Probably some distinctions, some differences, some unique twists and turns, and you may have even said, hey, my neighbor said something I like even better. Well, I want to think about this. What do people in general outside of this room think of science? In fact, Kelly said something a little this morning that, Kelly, if you'll forgive me, I'd like to disagree with. You said, if you're not a science teacher, you're in the wrong room. I disagree. If you're not a science teacher, this is the best place to be. If you're not a science teacher, you're going to have so much more fun here. Lab coats and test tubes, fun, magic, mad scientists, and would you admit that some of us are geeks? Yeah, and have fun with it. So yeah, is science magic? Well, what do you think the public thinks? Doesn't the public have a little impression that, I don't know how they do that, but whoa, that was like magic. And so what do we put on? We have like university parent come days. We put on magic shows, don't we? Don't we treat it a bit like magic? Isn't that science? Or that? Or that? Do you have something on paper that captures some of that? Or that? Or this? Would you agree it's a little hard to capture science in a sentence? It's a bit hard. And yet sometimes we simplify it maybe a little too much. Science is knowledge. Is knowledge on any of the papers you read? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is not quite enough. Science is organized knowledge. All right, that's how a lot of people would write it. Is this right? Facts about the natural world. Or now, I have to say, Neil deGrasse Tyson, a pretty smart guy, if you know him. Now, if you look at that quote, what is he sort of implying science is? Science is truth. It's almost a definition. Maybe he wouldn't say he was intending, but it's almost like a definition. So what do you think? Do these get it? Do they have parts of the story, maybe? But maybe there's more to it. Maybe we should say, oh, it's organized. And maybe it's not all knowledge, maybe it's knowledge about the natural world. Does that get it? Well, maybe. Maybe there's more to that story. Maybe we could say, yeah, data and facts, all about whatever we've been studying and charts and, yeah, is this it? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Is that science teaching? I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, a lot of my own teaching in years past has been this. That I basically go blah, 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 and I write it on the board, they write it down, and I assume it's just going to go right into their head like a blank slate. I am guilty of this. And it basically means, yes, my job is to take all this knowledge in my head and pour it into theirs, like this. This is a way of thinking about teaching or education that has really been at the root of so much of what education is. Where on Bloom's taxonomy is this? Where would you see it? Do you see it? Isn't it at the lowest level? But I have been guilty of this. I catch myself still doing that. There are many problems with it, aren't there? Here's one. A kid's head isn't empty, isn't it? Some of you may have been to a CERC talk I did not so long ago. The whole idea that kids don't walk into your room a blank slate. Their heads are full of all kinds of things. So when you go blah, 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 does it even get in? Is there even room for it? Good chance there's not even room for it. There's no place for it to stick because their heads are full. There's other problems. Here's another problem. If science is facts about the natural world, then it makes science like a collection of information. Like, I don't know, an encyclopedia or a warehouse that maybe it's like trophies. Science is, oh, I discovered this, put my name on it, put it on the shelf. So it belongs like maybe best in a museum. Or science is static. Well, now we keep adding, so, okay, science is growing, but what about all the old knowledge? Isn't it like shoved in a file cabinet or in a museum on a shelf? Or is it debatable? Is there, quote unquote, knowledge that we have since said, oh, that was wrong? Isn't there? Sure, if science says it's true, it's got to be true. Is science truth? Isn't that a little too simplistic? There's another problem. It gives the impression, especially to students, you got to be a smart person to do science. And what about the kid who walks in? I'm not one of those smart people. Don't kids feel that way when they walk into a lot of our rooms? It's not me. I'm just a tourist. I'm just riding the raft for fun. Somebody else is really in charge and knows what they're doing. So where is the excitement, the mystery? Is science just facts? Would you agree the answer is not just facts, right? It's way more than that. And we can even add this. I am not just a tourist. The kid could say, I'm not just going to play imitator or amateur. There's way more to science. I want the mystery. I want to explore. Science is alive. It's living, breathing, growing, changing. Wouldn't you agree? Science is not a dead museum thing. There's so many mysteries left to go. We know more about Mars and the moon than we do about our own ocean, especially at the bottom. There's way more to be discovered. Here's what some people have said about science. Now, capture this. Science is a way of learning about the natural world, an organized way of studying things, a process of observing, asking questions, and finding things out, a methodology. Do you notice some theme there? Beyond knowledge, what are some common ideas here? Maybe we can pick out that. It's more than just the facts or knowledge, isn't it? Isn't it a way or a process? Carl Sagan said it. Science is a way of thinking, much more than this body of knowledge. So what is my classroom focused on? Are kids doing the thinking, the processing, or are they learning knowledge? Now, is there room for knowledge? Is there need for knowledge? Absolutely. But is that all? Is really the emphasis? No. Science is alive. There's exploration still to be done. And can I even add this? Science is human. We make science out to be this, like this, I don't know, this impenetrable wall of, it's forever, it's eternal, you can't shake it. If science has it, it's done. Well, what does that leave for the kid to do? Nothing. There's nothing left. But science is very real. Isn't it changing, growing? Are we even throwing old ideas out and revising them for better? So what is science? It's way more than just what goes in my head as knowledge and facts. Well, there's a second question. How does this taint this? What do I want my students to become? All right, time for the other card. Would you answer that question on the colored card? At the end of a school year, how has my science class changed my students? So did you see some interesting answers? Did you get some ideas? Would you agree there's an awful lot of wisdom in this room? Experience, ideas, and the working and collaborating, sharing ideas is very powerful. And do I dare say, when your students walk in, even on day one, there's a lot of wisdom in this room, or experience, or ideas, to like a gold mine for you to dig into. So, you wrote an answer to that question. Would this be it? Is this what you wrote? Is that what you wrote? Do I dare say how much of education is designed on that premise? Don't we design a little too closely to that model? Okay, students, take notes, blah, 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 blah. Guess what's on the test? Fill in the blank, blah, fill in the blank, blah. How much have I been guilty of that? Way too much. I see you did well in school, but what world skills do you have? Tests. I can take tests. Is that what we've trained them to do? Yeah. By the way, if this moment ever comes up, boy, grab it when you get it, right? Maybe instead, here's one thing I want for my students, one thing. You see something, go for it. What do I want to instill in them? I want them to have an insatiable, what's the word? Curiosity. I want them to explore and want to go for it and dig and keep learning. I don't want them to ever stop wondering and trying to figure out, wow, why is it that way? I want them to wonder and have a mystery and love continuing to learn. What is this? And are we ever going to really use this for something in my lifetime that, like, I don't know, time travel? I want them to wonder and learn. Anybody capture a little bit of that in some of what you read? Do you see any of that sense? So there could be a lot of answers. We talk about things like resilience and critical thinking, lots of things that we ask for our students. One thing for sure is I want them to have an ongoing, insatiable wonder and a desire to learn. Sometimes we use that old kind of catchphrase, lifelong learners. I want them to never stop wanting to just to learn. There is a second thing, and a lot of you could have added probably a long, long list from the wisdom in this room, I'm sure many things. But this kind of gets a little bit. This kind of hits home because just yesterday I was in another town helping my daughter move into an apartment for college. And to help set up a new apartment, where did we go to get us some of her furniture? IKEA. And guess how easy it is to read the instructions? Okay, well, some of you know. Number two, I want them to have the confidence and skill to solve problems that, and here's kind of the clincher, they've never seen before. What do I usually teach them to do? Solve problems that they have seen before. That's not my goal anymore. What's my goal now? Something they've never, ever seen. Something that almost blindsides them, but they have the confidence and skill to say, okay, I think I can do this. All right? Here's a puzzler. Don't say anything out loud. Nothing out loud. You'll spoil it for your neighbor. What's this a picture of? Now, just show of hands. How many of you have seen this picture before? I don't see one yet. Okay, most of us are newcomers. All right? I want you to solve this. You've never seen it before. It might help if I rotate it. Don't say out loud. If you say, would you just show me a little hand? I don't want to embarrass anybody, just a little hand. Now, for the rest of it, you might say, I don't see anything. I see it was a blob, a Rorschach test or something. See if you can, if those of you who are sitting next to somebody who gets it, those who get it, now here's your job. What hint can you give a neighbor that doesn't give it away? but you help them. Give them a little hint. Little hand up if you see it now. Little hand up. Hand up if you see it now. Hand up if you see it now. Who would have ever thought? Hey, do you see it? Okay, those who see it, don't say what it is. Little hand up. Not too many. A few hands are going up. If you got a hand next to you, turn to them and say, give me a hint. Okay, little hands now if you see it. If you see it, little hands up. Okay, now those who do, would you agree with me? You see a fly up there on the screen? You see a fly up there on the screen, right? Yeah. Everybody else is saying, what? All right, how about this? What is it? If you think you know, this time I'll say, go ahead and give your idea to a neighbor. Don't have to hide it this time. If you do think you know what it is, see what your neighbor thinks, see if you and your neighbor agree. What is this? I can hear lots of very interesting theories. How many of you feel pretty confident what it is? Pretty confident. Okay? This particularly gives confidence to those who have some experience in earth science. What is this? River meandering literally over a 28-year cycle. 28 years. It's a river in Peru, by the way. So I would like my students to be able to dig in with confidence and skill problems they've never seen before. Most of those you've never seen, they're kind of short and simple, but I want them to be able to tackle problems they've never, ever seen. And there's a reason for that. 65% of today's school kids will end up doing jobs that haven't even been invented yet. Yet what are we training them for? Well, a little bit like the old factory model where we're cranking out people to work in a factory or something to that effect. So education is being reformed, but it's a big monster to reform. We're working very slowly at it, but we're trying to retrain for jobs that don't exist, in technologies that have not been invented, to solve problems that we haven't even yet identified as problems. So what do we need? We need kids, students, to come out of our classes and to go on through high school and beyond that can handle something brand new that I, as a teacher, have never even experienced before. But I want my students to be able to handle something that I don't even know exists. They have to be able to think outside the box. There'll be future jobs that I don't even know what some of these are. Notice this, World Economic Forum listed in 2020 the top 10 skills. How many of those skills would you say are really strongly done in your classroom? I look at that and I have to think, ooh, I've got a lot of work to do. There's not memorization up on that list. Spitting facts into their head and having them spit them back is not on the list. It means not only for students, it means for us as teachers, for me, to get out of my comfort zone and to begin to explore myself, new ways of teaching. Helping my students make decisions that I don't even know they're going to face. Not this. To have confidence, and skill. We're going to try a little experiment here now where you get to play or be the scientist a bit. To do this, you're going to need a group of 3 or 4 at most. 3 or 4 people sitting around you. And in a minute, I'm going to need one of you to come and get a couple of things. So they're going to get 2 items, a thermometer, we have various types, and 1 alcohol swab. So here's the task. Very simple. You'll have an alcohol pad, one of them, and you'll have a thermometer. I'm going to ask you to know that if you have this type of thermometer, it's the bottom end that does the sensing. You're going to actually, in a moment, tear open the pack and immediately wipe the sensitive part of the thermometer, immediately. And then you can take the pad off and just watch. Try to get a reading, so make sure your thermometer is on. If you have any of those types, you do the bottom tip. If you have either of these types, you may have to swipe wet the whole thermometer. You might have to wipe the whole strip on that side or the whole glass on this side to get it to sense it. So tear open the pack, one good wipe, and then watch and observe. Don't explain, just observe. So if you have a piece of paper, as we mentioned at the beginning, would you write down one or more observations? Not explanations, just observations. I now would like you to generate one or more questions that either you came up with or you think maybe students would come up with. Either you and your group, or what questions might your students come up with based on what you observed. What I'd like you now to do, would you find a group sitting next to you, share your observations, and then your questions with them. I'll give you just 60 seconds, so make it fairly quick. Your observations and your questions. Another group. I'd like your group to come up with an idea of a next experiment to try. A next experiment. Before you do that, don't talk just yet. We have very limited equipment. I don't have any other kinds of thermometers, but there were about 3 different types up here. I have more alcohol swipes. And if you would like to try, I do have a little bit of just tap water, if you want to make a little run with that in an experiment. But I'll give you about 4 minutes to decide on a next experiment and conduct it. Decide what it's going to be, and then conduct it. In 4 minutes, be done. I'm going to ask you in a minute to share with, again, the same group behind you or in front of you or beside you, what your experiment was, and what data or observations you made. That's going to be your task, and then I've got a final question that I'll give you after you've done that. So you have 60 seconds. What was your experiment? What did you observe from it? No explanation yet. Just what did you try? What did you notice? Share that 60 seconds. Go. Final task is a question. I'm going to ask you not to talk about this. At least initially, I want you to come up with your own idea before you say a word to anybody else. And this is where I need a piece of paper in front of everybody. You're going to write your own answer down. That alcohol swab, before you tear open the packet, what is its temperature? Don't say an answer, write an answer. What is the wet swab's temperature before you tear open the packet? All right, stop, please. Without saying anything, no words, would you just trade papers with the neighbor? All right, let me ask this quick question. Raise a hand if you and your neighbors were 100% in agreement. 100% in agreement on that answer. Raise your hand. Look around the room. Look around the room. How many hands are up? How many hands are not up? Do you notice that we're not 100% in agreement in this room? That there are differences. So let me ask this question. Was the alcohol swab room temperature warmer or colder? Who votes room temperature? Hands up. Who votes warmer? Who votes colder? You know what most students will say? Colder. Can you believe that there's good reason they say that? The trouble is, how do I help them figure this one out without just telling them an answer? How do I help them without just telling them an answer? How do I let them figure it out like a scientist? That would be the next challenge. So the student comes up with this answer, you thought it was that one. How do I help them figure it out? In my classroom, what is the student doing? What is the student thinking? Are they being scientists? Are they exploring, discovering? Are they struggling to make sense of data? Are they figuring it out for themselves? Are they creating understanding? Or do I go blah, 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 and do they go blah, 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 black? I just went to a leadership conference, and I want to kind of end with this. A leadership conference last week. And funny thing, everybody who came and spoke, and then another speaker, and then another speaker, and then another speaker, and they all had two things in common. They said the only way to build a leader is to face up to two things. It's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, they celebrate it. Celebrate mistakes. Why? Because you learn when you don't get it right the first time. What do you learn when you get it right the first time? Nothing. You learn when you make mistakes. The second thing, fear. Fear of making mistakes. What's the number one problem I have to overcome in my classroom? Students are afraid. I spend my whole year trying to get them over that fear. And in fact, do I dare say, it's me too. I'm afraid of making mistakes. Here's my challenge as we end this morning, that maybe all of us as teachers would say, I am going to jump into this river this year with both feet. I'm going to get into that raft. I'm going to hit these rapids, and I'm going to make mistakes. I might fall out of the boat. My kids may fall out from time to time, but we're going to get each other back in there. And by the end of the year, my students will not just be a tourist. They will be able to take that boat through the rapids, even if I'm not there, because they have had the experience of being a scientist. They're not just tourists. Have a wonderful year.